This is Gesher, the podcast that's bridging the gap between the Jewish and evangelical Christian communities with conversations that matter. Here's your host, Ty Perry, with the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Gesher, where we are trying to bridge the gap between the evangelical and Jewish communities with good conversations. And I'm in conversation today with my guest, Rabbi Felipe Goodman. Rabbi Goodman is senior rabbi at the historic Temple Beth Shalom in Las Vegas, Nevada, a post he's held since 1998. Prior to this, he served as assistant rabbi in Comunidad Bet El de Mexico in Mexico City, one of the largest conservative synagogues in Latin America. Rabbi Goodman is active in the American Israel Public Affairs Committee and a host of other organizations involved in Jewish and pro-Israel causes. But most importantly to me, he's a dear friend. So, Felipe, good to see you. Welcome back to Gesher.
Hey, Ty, nice to be here. It's always good to see you. We miss you here in Las Vegas. Should come back.
We'll wait till it cools down a little bit, and then I'll be out in a heartbeat.
Come on.
Well, today's interview is kind of a potpourri. We're going to go through a few different topics. I love talking to you, Felipe, because you really do have your finger on the pulse of a lot of what's going on in Israel, what's happening in the Jewish community, the pro-Israel community, and you care. We have a shared love for Israel, and so I want to talk to you about a few different things. First of all, let me just say the last time that we spoke on the podcast was October 31st, so just a couple weeks after Hamas's attack on Israel in 2023. A lot has changed since then. When we spoke last, the world, at least the news cycle, was still somewhat sympathetic towards Israel, still viewing them as victimized. It didn't take very long for that narrative to change, and much of the world has changed, or at least their venom against the Jewish people has surfaced. So I want you to just talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing, what you're experiencing since October 31st in terms of the world's response to Israel and to the Jewish community.
You know, it's interesting the way you phrased that introduction with the word victim, right? The world saw us as victims after October 7th, and then the world went away from that idea. I really have come to realize, Ty, that there's really no victims here, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, the 7th of October was devastating. They murdered, pillaged, and raped our people. But we also, you know, as much as that was horrible, we are not in 1940. Right? We are not victims, and we're going to defend ourselves. And defending ourselves means that people are going to suffer the consequences of their actions. And if the world doesn't like that, then the world doesn't like that. You know, I'm sorry, but Jews are going to defend themselves. Yeah. So that's number one. Number two is the Palestinians are also not victims because they are the aggressors. Okay? So everything that's happening, they brought upon themselves. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be very careful with this narrative of victimization, because I don't think that's where it's at. You know, it's a little bit different than that. It's not like when the United States, let's say, attacked, Rhodesia or Zimbabwe, right, where there's nothing there, right? No. These, you know, Hezbollah has 100,000 rockets pointed at us. Yep. So they're not victims either. You know, Hamas fired over 3,000 rockets in 2 weeks, right? So they're not victims either. Right. So it's really aggressors versus defenders. Right, and we're just defending our people. That's all we're doing, and we have the right to do that.
I want to jump in there because you said you didn't say Hamas, you said the Palestinians, and I think this is interesting because I was just recently reading an article about the percentage, something like 80% of Palestinians, quote unquote, living in the West Bank and in Gaza support October 7th. And so can you speak to that? For a lot of us, we would like to be able to say, I'm against Hamas, but I'm for the Palestinian people. And certainly we don't want civilian bloodshed. However, did they make this mess themselves?
So I also read that poll that you saw, and I'll tell you something that was said to me by the bus driver that I had on my third trip to Israel this year. Mm. So somebody says, you know, what about the innocent civilians? And this guy, who was really sharp, takes the microphone. He overheard this from the back of the bus or something. And says, yeah, let's talk about the innocent civilians. And at that point, right, There's 133 of them in Gaza. They're hostages.
Hmm.
So more and more, I'm in that corner where, yeah, Hamas was chosen by them. Remember, they had democratic elections. They've had more of a chance to depose Hamas, and they haven't done it. Civilians are hiding the hostages. This last hostage rescue that we saw, where Noah Argamani was freed, and the other two hostages, they were being held by civilians. There was a Palestinian journalist who works for Al Jazeera, of all places, right? By the way, Al Jazeera is like the worst of all evils, too.
Yes.
He was hiding hostages. So, yes, children are innocent. But you know what? When UNRWA, that the world hesitates to designate as a terrorist organization, is the one doing the education of these children, you understand what we're up against. Yeah. Again, we're just ourselves. No other country in the world would stop short of doing what we're doing, and they would be doing even more.
Since we spoke, we've had this rash of campus protests, if you could even call them protests, just absolute moral rot happening on college campuses. How is that affecting the broader Jewish community? I know you don't speak for every Jewish person, but what's the impact been? Is there an impact on the Jewish community because of that?
Of course there's an impact. Look, the endowments in many of these universities, especially the Ivy Leagues, right, are really taken care of by many Jewish families who have actually spoken up and said, not a dime more to these universities. Mm-hmm. At this point, I don't know what an effect it has other than psychological, because they have so many billions of dollars in their stash that I don't think that withdrawing the money right now does any good. It's only symbolical. But we have to go to that symbol, because it's important for them to know that they will get nothing from us unless they stop what they're doing. Mm-hmm. This sickness of saying it's not anti-Semitism, it's anti-Zionism, needs to stop. Right? It's not anti-Israel, it's anti-Jewish. What really has affected the Jewish community, from my perspective, because I speak to a lot of the kids that are in college campuses, they kind of like have learned to ignore it. I mean, they're faced by it, but they just go around it and they go to their class, or they went to their class because they're in summer breaks. Most universities are okay, but what really takes a toll on us is when we see our own children turning against Israel. Right? And it's not a lot of them. We have to say the truth. Not a lot of them, not overwhelming numbers. But in each one of these stupid encampments, you find a bunch of Jews sitting in the middle of these idiots, right? Either doing a Passover Seder or praying. It's just ridiculous. They think they have a moral compass. Well, just wait. Just wait. Because if history is any indication of what happens to these people, they will be the first ones to be taken out together with us, right? Because when push comes to shove, for anti-Semites, all Jews are Jews.
Yeah. Now, that's going to be surprising to some listeners, particularly Christian listeners, that there are Jewish people, young Jewish people particularly, who are not Zionists. A person very close to me, obviously don't share the same worldview. He has been active in the encampment at the University of Michigan, and has been writing about some of the Jewish students that he's encountered there, and how they're locking arms against Israel and the occupation and all this garbage. Where does that come from in the Jewish community? Why are these kids anti-Israel if it seems like it goes entirely against their interests, not just in a political interest, but this is a place where it's to be a refuge for people when they're attacked?
So that's a very good question, and it's a question we should be talking about a lot. So up until 1948, the last time we had a sovereign Jewish state was during the Bar Kokhba revolt, right? 2nd century.
Right.
And it lasted for very few years. So for all of those 2,000 years, we were victims. And I think that what 1948 and the establishment of the State of Israel did, it broke the cycle of victimhood. But you cannot break 2,000 years of victimhood with 70 years of statehood or 80 years of statehood. And I think that deep-seated in the mind of many Jews is this idea that we're victims. And we have to understand the victim mentality, and the Palestinians are victims, and we can't do this whatever they perceive as we're doing to them, because we were also victims. And the thing is, like I said before, we are no victims.
Mm-hmm.
We are no longer victims. We will never be victims again. And these students better get it in their heads that we will defend ourselves, whether they like it or not. And like I said again, they are in the minority, thank God, Ty. Yes,
Yeah.
they're vociferous, they're loud, they write, but so do we. And, we'll see what happens in the end. Look, I see Facebook pages from kids that grew up in my congregation, not a lot of them, again, one or two, who have positions on this that I can't even understand where they got it from, where they grew up here. But the majority of the children that grew up in our congregation, and I've been doing their weddings in the summer, and it's been a great summer for weddings, by the way. They are with their people, 100%. So again, this is a minority, and let's not take our finger from that, because in the end, right, even though they're vociferous, they will not prevail.
So I listened to the podcast from Commentary Magazine, John Podhoretz, maybe not your favorite outlet, I don't know, politically, but he was talking the other day about this phenomenon that you're referring to, and he calls it "as a Jew syndrome," and I'm quoting. These Jewish people who are coming out and saying, well, as a Jew, I'm opposed to the occupation and all those things. Are these people, do they tend to be actually connected to Judaism and to a Jewish identity? Or is it more they have more allegiance to a leftist identity and ideology, and they're just saying, well, I'm Jewish, and so I put my identity on top of that to legitimize what I'm saying here?
That's a great question. And let's leave aside for a second political ideologies, okay? Because that's a subject for another time. Many of the young people that I see engaged in this anti-Israel movement that are Jewish are engaged Jewishly, tremendously. They're not people that don't care about Judaism. But again, their Jewish identity is informed by, as a Jew, I can't condone this. Well, as a Jew, you have to read Jewish history.
Right.
And you have to see that what happened to us for 2,000 years is that we never defended ourselves. And that's why we were victims. And that's why you are reacting like, as a Jew, I have to let myself be killed. This can no longer be sustained. They live in a different world. They live in a different era. However, they are, many of them, very much identified as real Jews, which is an interesting phenomenon.
It is interesting because I just read an article, I think it was from the Religious News Service, about Christian support of Israel. And I mean Christian in the true sense, evangelical, not just Gentile. And they said one of the key markers for determining whether a person is going to support Israel, whether they're going to stand up against anti-Semitism within the church, is if they take the scriptures seriously as it concerns Israel. So if they are actual students of the Bible, they are going to be friends of the Jewish people in Israel. The further they get from biblical orthodoxy, the further they get from that. So it obviously isn't an exact translation at all into Judaism.
It's very interesting what you're saying, but let me tell you another problem we're having right now that you may have never talked about with me, but our seminaries, our rabbinical seminaries, are very well-established seminaries for over 100 years in the United States. Both the Reform Seminary and the Conservative Seminary, JTS, where I went to, we are having some students get ordained there who are anti-Zionists. Now, you cannot say that these students don't know Judaism,
right,
or branches from the Jewish community. Again, there's 2 or 3 of them, but the fact that they exist, when I went to rabbinical school, Ty, I had to keep kosher and keep Shabbat, but I also had to be a Zionist, or else I would not be admitted into rabbinical school. So somehow that standard has actually floated away from being a standard of religious practice, at least in my community.
Yeah.
So, and yes, you will not find any off-right or off-center people that jive with the anti-Semitic and the anti-Israel ideals. But in the Jewish community, it's not linked to how much Torah they know or how much religion they know. Again, the majority of us that are learned, the majority of us that study in all of the movements, Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, we all advocate for the state of Israel. But there's a small minority that take the fringe knowledge, right, of, look, violence is horrible. Look at Hanukkah, right? The rabbis of the Talmud had a big problem with Hanukkah because of the violence of the Maccabees. The book of Maccabees is not in the canon of the Hebrew Bible.
Right.
Because of the violence. How does the prophetic reading, the reading Hanukkah end? Lo b'chayil velo b'koach, ela beruchi. Not by might and not by power, but by my spirit, says God.
Right.
Right? Why do you think the rabbis chose that? Because they were firm believers that you couldn't stand up against the Romans and survive as a people. Yes, and I understand where they were coming from. They didn't want to be skinned alive. But right now, we don't live in that time anymore. So we cannot read that or inform ourselves from that and translate it into our political reality and social reality right now.
Yeah.
We have to put that where it belongs and still learn from it. There's a lot of knowledge and spirituality to gain from it. Of course, I believe in the Spirit of God moving me before violence. But when people come to kill me, the Talmud says, I wake up and kill them first.
Right. Right. Well, that's the American scene. Let's go over to Israel. You've been to Israel multiple times in the last calendar year. What did you experience? What's the morale like there? And I guess, how did it impact you?
So it's a great question. You're asking all these incredible questions, Ty. I don't know.
I'll pay you later for saying that. Thank you.
Look, every time I went, it was different. And you know this, you've been to Israel. In Israel, a month is like 10 years in regular time.
Yeah.
A country. So the first time I went, it was in November. And it was like Hamas flipped a switch where the lack of unity among Israelis was instantly overridden by this incredible sense of national unity, where no matter who you were, where you're coming from, the unity was unbelievable. And as time progressed and as the hostages didn't make it home, and as the prime minister began to, fumble a little bit on his strategy, people began to start questioning where this is going within Israel. Look, nobody's refusing to fight. Nobody's refusing to go to Gaza. Nobody's refusing to sacrifice. But people are protesting in large numbers. So by the second time I went, these protests, you could see them in the street. There were 100 people in the street corner with signs that said, Bibi must go. We have to bring the hostages back. Deal at any measures. Just deal for the hostages. By the third time I was there, which was April, these protests had thousands of people.
Wow.
Today, they have hundreds of thousands of people, where the families of the hostages are beginning to really take a leading role in saying, look, you have to get our people out of there by whichever means necessary, because Hamas cannot be eradicated. We all know that. I'm not saying I believe that, Ty, but that's what people are saying in Israel. Hamas cannot be eradicated. So we just need to get our people back, and then we'll deal with these guys later. Just get them back. I personally believe that without military pressure, this is never going to happen.
Yeah.
But I have to put myself in the shoes of the family members of those hostages. And today we read in the newspaper there's only about 50 of them still left alive.
Right.
So my heart goes out to them, and we have to do whatever it takes. There's a mitzvah. There's a commandment in Judaism, Pidyon Shvuim, the redeeming of captives. Right? By the way, one of the only letters that we have signed by the hand of Maimonides, of the Rambam, that's in the library of the Jewish Theological Seminary, is a letter where he's advocating for the redemption of captives, even against the interest of the Jewish community itself. Because we cannot let a Jew die when we know they're alive and they could survive if we do something.
Yeah.
Right? And then we'll deal with the consequences. Yes, it's a very complicated discussion. And if you look at the rabbinic sources, the rabbis are all over the place in this redemption of captives. At what cost, right? That's the bottom line. And then, of course, Netanyahu's popularity is not helping the situation.
Right.
And the fringe, super extreme right people that he has in his government. By the way, I don't think that in American politics, characters to that extreme right exist in our, like the one Netanyahu has in his cabinet.
These are politically right.
Yeah,
and they're also religiously motivated as well.
Yeah, and he needs for the coalition, which it was like selling your soul to the devil. So even people in the right say, do we really need to go with these guys? Like, this is really hurting us. And they are the ones that really are preventing the deals from going forward and whatever needs to be done from being done to just get our people out of there.
So the Biden administration, they seem to be a little schizophrenic when it comes to their response to Israel in the recent days, but they keep pushing for a day after plan. And we see that even in Israeli politics with Benny Gantz leaves the war cabinet and wants this day after. I know. Bibi doesn't call you on a weekly basis. He probably should to get your take on this. But what do you think is a realistic day after plan for the war for Gaza?
Look, the problem with Netanyahu is that his day after plan is staying in power, right? And again, I'm advocating what 80% of the Jewish people are saying right now. So I'm in the large majority here. I don't think he knows. Within his own coalition, within his own government, the chief of staff is asking for guidance because nobody really knows what's going to happen the day after they leave Gaza. At some point, they have to leave Gaza. They cannot stay there.
Right.
But the fringes in their government, the right-wing fringe people, are advocating for us to resettle Gaza. And that's not possible for a myriad of reasons. Look, I believe we should have never left. But that's my personal opinion. But now that we're out, we can't come back. Ship has sailed,
yeah.
We can't come back. And so it's important that we understand that the moment the Israeli Defense Force pulls out of Gaza, God knows what's going to happen, right? We need to have some idea of what could happen. Look, Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, they're a bunch of losers. They're corrupt, they're inept, they're violent also. So I understand when Bibi says they cannot govern. I get it, but we have to have a solution because this cannot go on forever. If Israel was the size of the United States or the size of China or the size of Russia, hey, we can go on for years. But you're talking about a country that fits 9 times within the state of Nevada.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we have to pull out. We're fighting a war 30 minutes from people's homes.
And that's something that I think most Americans we don't feel that, because when we fight wars, and at least in modern days, it's over oceans. This is over a border you can literally look over. And it does seem that whatever the answer is to this day after, whatever that may be, part of it's going to have to be a destabilizing of Iran, because they're the ones funding so much of the what's happening there with Hamas and things like that.
So look, the Iranian question is a big question. That Iranian deal that Obama did should have never been made. Mm-hmm. Again, that's another ship that sailed. But the Biden administration needs to really do something about this, right? Yeah. Because it's a responsibility of the American government having made that deal, and they have to do something about it. As long as they're there, if they're there until January next year, I don't care. They have to do something. Because as long as Iran stands, there will not be peace in the Middle East.
Yeah.
But that's the problem. That's the one problem, and we have to finish them. Sorry to say that. I mean, I sound like a warmonger, but as long as Iran is there, nothing good will happen.
Right.
Again, Hezbollah, the puppet arm of Hamas in Lebanon, has 100,000 rockets. I just want people to understand. 100,000 rockets. Where do you store 100,000 rockets? You store them under people's homes, mm-hmm. right? Tunnels they have in Gaza, they have in southern Lebanon. So the moment Israel goes in to destroy those 100,000 rockets, you can imagine the amount of people that are going to die.
Right.
We're going to have to do it to defend ourselves. So this is going to be another outcry. Lebanon's a sovereign country, so it's another complicated situation, escalation. And we don't want to see it, but if Iran is there, this is going to have to happen at some point. It's a matter of what do we take out first, Hezbollah or Iran?
Yeah. Well, let's go to Hamas, because you recently had a unique opportunity. You got to meet and interview the son of one of the founders of Hamas. This man, his name is Mossab Hassan Youssef, known as the Green Prince, and he eventually became a key undercover agent for the Shin Bet. So, tell us about that event. How do you, a rabbi in Las Vegas, end up interviewing a former member of Hamas?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you, Las Vegas is pretty awesome. And what happens in Vegas hopefully doesn't stay in Las Vegas and goes out to the rest of the world.
Yes.
So I've been working really closely with Magen David Adom, which is like the Israeli Red Star of David, because to me, they're a wonderful organization.
Yeah.
And we actually were able to raise so much money for them that they helped me organize this, and they brought him here. And, we had over 700 people in our synagogue for that. It was really fantastic.
Wonderful.
You know, in evangelical numbers, 700 is nothing, right? But in Jewish numbers, 700 is a lot of people. We, I have to tell you, I spent some time alone with him before the interview, the main interview, and I was fascinated by his intensity. Clearly, his years of growing up, as a Palestinian in Ramallah, were horrific and transformed him into a very intense fellow. I apologize. And I asked him a lot of questions before we went to the big interview because I wanted to make sure he wanted to answer them. And he did say to me some things that I was not expecting. For example, I asked him if I could ask about the sexual violence, right? Because one of the things in my mind is like, how can devout Muslims or so-called devout Muslims like Hamas, they think about God all day, go into Israel and rape women and children and just like do these horrible acts of sexual violence that they did beyond all of the other stuff. By the way, I saw some of the backpacks in Israel that Magen David Adom still has, where these people brought condoms with them. So for us to pretend that they were not intending on doing this from the onset is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So his answer to me was, look, they live in a highly repressed society where whenever they fantasize about other women, they fantasize about Israeli women, because in the place where they live, women are repressed. They're like shadows.
Right.
They're non-existent. They're dressed in black. That you can see their faces, right? So for them, Israeli women are like these sex symbols, these sex myths that exist on the other side of that fence. So in their minds, since they're growing up, all their fantasies, right, move around Israeli women.
Sure.
So the first thing they did when they were able to cross the fence was exactly that. And as if you've read his book, he talks about being raped himself by a family member when he was a kid. So all of these sexual violence actions that are reprehensible and horrific to us and are like sodomization of human beings, apparently in places like Gaza, they're like, the law of the land. They live in medieval times. It's horrific.
Yeah.
So that was just the tip of the iceberg of the interview, right? He basically said what we already know. If you don't go after Iran, and if you pretend that we can deal with Hamas like you deal with any other enemy in the world, you're wrong. They are not going to stop.
Yeah.
Because they have nothing to, or they've been trained to think they have nothing to lose. They have a lot to lose. They have to lose their lives, which is a lot.
Right. But in the Judeo-Christian worldview, our lives mean something. They have value.
Right.
And in at least the fundamentalist Islam, it doesn't seem to have any value. So I think we're seeing that. Hey, I want to ask you one more question. I know we have to get going here, but shifting gears. So we've been in the U.S., been to Israel. Let's go to Mexico, your home country. Earlier this month, Mexico elected Claudia Sheinbaum as its first female president. She's also Mexico's first Jewish president. As a native Mexican and as a Jewish person, what's your take on her election?
The day after she was elected, I got no less than 100 messages and emails and phone calls congratulating me. And by like the third one, I said to my wife, these people are crazy. They don't understand what's going on. So first of all, let's define who is a Jew, right? Jewish law defines a Jew as born of a Jewish mother or somebody who converts to Judaism. Claudia Sheinbaum is biologically Jewish. Her mother's Jewish, her father's Jewish. She is not part of the Jewish community. She has never been involved in the Jewish community. She doesn't identify herself as a Jew, and she doesn't live a Jewish life. Shimon Peres, right, the former prime minister and president of Israel, one of my favorite quotes of his is, who is a Jew? Whoever gives his or her children a Jewish education. Well, Claudia Sheinbaum neither got a Jewish education nor gave her children one. Not only that, Ty, the times when she's had the opportunity to speak about her Judaism, she's literally, in a quote, said that her Judaism informs her socialism. Meaning, if she would live in the United States, she probably would be in one of those encampments.
Right.
She campaigned for a year And she was, the one at the command post of her campaign and her party when October 7th happened. Not once, forget about condemning Hamas, not once did she speak about the acts of sexual violence against women. As a woman, any candidate in the world for any political office would have used this as an opportunity to bring women to her side.
Right.
She didn't even touch it because we know that she supports the Palestinians. Look, 2 weeks before the election, the Israeli embassy in Mexico almost was set on fire. And it came very close. Thanks to the Mexican police and some security measures of the embassy, it didn't happen. And thankfully, no lives were lost. But it came close. Do you think she said anything? I don't remember another time in recent years where an embassy in Mexico, for any other country, including the American embassy, was almost set on fire.
Yeah.
Right? I think it merited some sort of word of something said to the Jewish community and the Israeli government. Nothing was said. She is part of this. So the other problem is, to the Jewish community, she's not Jewish. But to the non-Jews, she is a Jew. So, by the way, when her economic politics and her economic policies do not go through the way they should, and when the country is collapsing economically, I hope I'm wrong, but it will, who do you think they're going to blame?
Jewish
the
people.
anti-Semites come out of the woodwork to blame the Jews because she's Jewish in their eyes.
Right.
Even though we literally want nothing to do with her. One more thing. She walks around wearing a cross sometimes, or in her skirt, a depiction of the image of the Virgin of Guadalupe.
I didn't know that.
You've been around Jews, right? You've been around me. You've traveled with me.
Right.
Do you ever think any of the Jews that you know will walk around with a cross around their necks? So she's trying to do it as a political statement to appeal to the masses in Mexico. So she has to be very careful when she uses religion as a mass weapon. Because even though there's only 50,000 Jews in Mexico, the other 99.9% of the country will soon remember she's not one of them either.
Right. Have an exact opposite of Queen Esther happening there in Mexico.
And Zelensky in Ukraine, he actually identifies as a Jew, is a child of survivors of the Holocaust, and is trying his best, really, to fight this evil.
Yeah.
But still, this one is the opposite. It's a really, really big problem.
Well, we've talked a lot about some pretty heavy things. Let me end with this. What's giving you some hope as you look at what's happening in Israel, as you shepherd your own congregation there? I used a very Christian term there. Sorry, shepherd. You're not a pastor, but as you lead your congregation.
Well, you can use Christian terms. I'm not offended by you, Ty. You can't offend me. We've seen some things together.
Sure.
Look, I think that in spite of everything bad that's going on around us, there are some things that should give us hope. A lot of things, actually. First of all, tremendous number of Jews have come back to the Jewish community after October 7th. You would not believe how many people have come out of the woodwork, say, I cannot believe this is happening. Now I understand why I have to be part of my community. And it's horrible that it takes a tragedy to make this happen, but people want to go to Israel. People want to help. People want to volunteer. I have 16 and 17-year-olds going on a trip to Israel in the summer by themselves with other parents, my congregation, to work with the Jewish National Fund as volunteers. So this has really brought us together. And the togetherness that I'm experiencing is something I've never experienced in my lifetime. According to the people that know about this, since 1973, the Yom Kippur War, we haven't experienced anything like this. So I'm enjoying that. That's a wonderful feeling to have. I also want to believe that this will not last forever. And when the dust settles, we will be able to tell the world, see, this is what we were talking about.
Yeah.
You do not believe us, but it always happens, right? Because the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And mark my words, it will happen again. And then the other thing, right? One of my favorite rabbis, who's no longer alive, Zichrono Libracha, may he rest in peace, Sidney Greenberg, wrote a prayer where it says that we as Jews have to pray as if everything depends on God, but we have to act as if everything depends on us. And this has brought us to do both things, right? To pray hard, but also take action. And that's what you need to be Jewish. Both things at the same time.
Felipe, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today and for coming on Gesher. so appreciative of your friendship and appreciate what you do for the Jewish people and for the state of Israel.
Always an honor and a pleasure to be with you.
You've been listening to Gesher, a ministry outreach production of FOI Equip, your free resource for learning and engaging with the scriptures from a Jewish perspective. To learn more, visit foiequip.org. And for more information about Ty, visit foi.org/Perry. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Shalom.